The rain wouldn't stop that night. It felt like the sky itself was grieving, heavy, cold, and endless. Inside a rusted blue minivan parked behind a grocery store, a woman sat quietly, her arms wrapped around two sleeping children. The younger one, a little girl with curly hair, had her head resting on her mother's lap. The boy, maybe 7, slept against the window, his small hand still clutching a toy car missing one wheel. The woman's name was Laura, and tonight, she was praying the rain would hide her tears. Across from her, in the driver's seat, her husband Mark sat silently, staring at the fogged-up windshield. His fingers tapped the steering wheel, nervous, restless. Laura looked at him and whispered, barely above the sound of the rain. "Don't tell the kids we're homeless, okay? They think this is just a camping adventure." Mark turned toward her, his eyes tired but soft. "They won't know," he said. "They'll wake up to a new home. I promise you that." A month earlier, they had a house. It wasn't much, peeling paint, squeaky floors, but it was home. Mark worked at a small construction company, and Laura picked up hours at a diner. Together, they made enough to keep the lights on and their kids, Eli and Sophie, happy. But when the company Mark worked for closed unexpectedly, their life began to unravel. 1 week turned into 2, and soon their savings disappeared into bills. Rent was late. Then came the notice on the door. Laura tried to hide the panic from the kids, smiling as she packed boxes and told them they were going on an adventure. But inside, she was breaking. They moved into the van the same day the landlord changed the locks. Mark promised it would only be temporary. "Just a few nights," he'd said. "I'll find something. I always do." But a few nights became a week. Then 2. The kids didn't know. They thought they were on a road trip. At night, Laura would tell them stories about stars and angels, while Mark parked in quiet corners of parking lots, trying to find places where the police wouldn't ask them to move. He hated seeing Laura curl up in the back seat, trying to sleep sitting up so the kids could stretch out. And every night, he whispered the same thing to himself. They'll wake up to a new home. It was a Sunday when things hit rock bottom. Laura went into the diner where she used to work, hoping for extra hours, but they'd already hired someone new. She came back to the van with a forced smile, holding 2 muffins she'd bought with the last few dollars in her purse. Mark wasn't there, he was out job hunting again. When he returned that evening, he was drenched from the rain, holding a small grocery bag. Inside was a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and 2 apples. He sat beside her and said quietly, "No one's hiring without an address." Laura looked down. "What are we going to do, Mark?" He reached over and took her hand. "We're not giving up. I'll figure it out. I promise." That night, while Laura sang softly to the kids in the back, Mark sat outside under the rain, head in his hands. A man walking his dog passed by and looked at him, hesitating for a moment before moving on. Mark felt invisible, like the world was watching but pretending not to see. The next morning, as they sat outside a gas station, Laura went inside to use the restroom and wash up the kids' faces. Mark stayed outside, trying to stretch his back after another night in the van. An older man with a gray beard and a baseball cap approached. "You folks traveling?" he asked kindly. Mark hesitated. "Something like that." The man smiled gently. "I used to travel a lot myself." "You from around here?" Mark nodded, unsure if he should admit the truth. The man looked at the van, the kids inside, and the pile of blankets. Then he said, quietly, "You know, there's a community center a few blocks down. They've got food, showers, and maybe a few leads on work. Tell him Richard sent you." Mark blinked. "Why are you helping us?" Richard shrugged. "Someone once helped me when I had nothing. Just passing it on." Small steps forward. At the community center, things began to shift. They were greeted by Maya, a volunteer with warm eyes and a voice that sounded like safety. She helped them get a warm meal and found a temporary shelter that had a family room available for a few nights. It wasn't a home, but it was a roof. Laura cried that night, not because of sadness, but because she could finally lay her children down in real beds. Mark began volunteering around the center to feel useful, fixing broken tables, repainting walls, and helping other families move in. It gave him a sense of purpose again. And one evening, while repairing a storage room door, Maya stopped by and said, "You've got good hands. You ever think about full-time maintenance work?" Mark smiled, unsure if she was serious. I'd take anything right now. She handed him a slip of paper with an address. Go see this man tomorrow. He owns a small construction company. Tell him I sent you. The next day, Mark wore his cleanest shirt and borrowed a pair of work gloves from the center. The owner, Mr. Daniels, was a kind, no-nonsense man in his 60s. He asked a few questions, looked at Mark's calloused hands, and said, "You look like someone who's seen hard work. Can you start tomorrow?" Mark almost couldn't speak. "Yes, sir, I can." For the first time in months, he came back to the shelter smiling. He lifted Laura into his arms and whispered, "I told you, they'll wake up to a new home." She laughed through her tears. One step at a time, Mark. The following weeks were grueling but good. Mark worked long hours, sometimes 12, 14 a day. He saved every dollar he could. The shelter allowed them to stay for a few more weeks while he got back on his feet. Laura, meanwhile, started helping in the kitchen at the center, preparing meals for families who'd just lost their homes too. She'd smile and tell them, "You'll make it through. I promise." She meant it. Every night, after tucking Eli and Sophie into bed, she and Mark would sit by the window of their small shelter room and dream out loud. One day, she'd say, "We'll have a little backyard again. The kids can play, and you can build them a swing. And you," he'd reply, "can plant those flowers you love so much." It wasn't much, but dreaming together made them feel alive again. 3 months later, Mark came home holding a stack of papers and a smile that could light up the whole room. "Laura," he said, "I found us a place. It's small, but it's ours." She froze. "What? How? We don't even have the deposit saved." He handed her the papers. "Mr. Daniels helped. He said he sees potential in me and fronted the deposit as an advance. He said every man deserves a second chance." Laura covered her mouth with her hands, tears falling freely. That night, they packed what little they had. Just a few clothes, a box of toys, and the blanket that had kept them warm in the van. When the kids asked where they were going, Mark smiled and said, "We're going home." It was a tiny, old cottage with cracked paint and a leaky faucet, but to Laura, it looked like a castle. She stood in the doorway, holding Sophie's hand, and whispered, "We made it." Mark looked at her, eyes glistening. "I told you. They'd wake up to a new home." The kids ran around, laughing, exploring every corner. Eli found a closet and called it his secret base. Sophie picked a corner of the living room and declared it her castle room. Laura watched them and smiled through tears. The house might have been humble, but the love that filled it made it brighter than any mansion. Weeks turned into months, and the family slowly built their new life. Mark kept working for Mr. Daniels, who eventually promoted him to foreman. Laura started baking at home and selling her treats at the community market. Every Sunday, they'd visit the community center, the same one that once gave them shelter, and bring food for the new families arriving there. Laura would kneel beside tired mothers and say, "Don't lose hope. I was here once too. You'll find your home again." And when Mark saw a father sitting outside, head in his hands, he'd sit beside him and say, "I know what it's like. Just hold on. One good day can change everything." One December morning, the kids woke up to a tree Mark had built out of old wood scraps and tinsel Laura found at the thrift store. Underneath were 2 small boxes, one for each child. Inside, Eli found a toy car, brand new. Sophie found a doll with curly hair just like hers. Taped to the bottom of the tree was a note written in Mark's handwriting. "Home isn't just a place. It's the people who never give up on each other." Laura read it aloud, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Mark and whispered, "You kept your promise." He smiled, pulling her close. "No, we did." Moral: even when life takes everything from you, love, hope, and kindness can build a home stronger than any walls.